So, you want to do a 2020 Game of the Year list 8 months late. Yeah, with the Captain America intro. What's up, everybody? Oh God, I put water on my fucking wrist. Damn. So yeah, this video is going up at the same time as my fucking I'm back YouTube announcement thing, right? I'm officially back in a different capacity than before. But hopefully, if you're a viewer of this channel, you will still be pleased with what you're about to hear and see, both today and also in just the coming months, I guess. Let me have a sip of my water. So, if you need a little more context, I encourage you to watch that announcement video first. You can recognize it by the fact that I'm on camera. But yeah, this is, I was thinking, what's a good way to get back into the swing of things? And obviously, a Game of the Year list is like, it just makes sense, right? That's something that I would hope that everybody's kind of interested to hear. And I do have a unique spin on it this time because 2020 was like the year where I was fully radicalized, I think. You might know me as someone who's always had relatively extreme opinions, right? I'm like super passionate about the stuff that I love. And then I just as passionately shit on the stuff that I don't like. And like last year especially, with how the pandemic kind of disrupted all our lives and how busy I was with both work and school, it really put into perspective for me what I value in games. And in the context of a Game of the Year list, it's interesting because I call this top 15 games of 2020, right? But yeah, and while I have played more than enough games to technically rank 15 games sort of from bottom to top, that is possible for me. I have played enough games for that. The reality is that I don't actually feel that passionate about most of these games, right? Like, I had fun with a lot of them, kind of, but it feels disingenuous, I guess, to like make a top 10 and like half the games on it you're gonna forget about in a year, right? So my spin on it instead is that, so number one, 5 of the games did not even come out in 2020, right? I split it into 4 different categories, right? The first category is the old 5, not the top 5, but the old 5, right? Old games that I sort of rediscovered or discovered for the first time in 2020, and that I thought a lot about, and that sort of made me appreciate different things about the medium again. So there's that category. Then there's the top 3, the 3 games from 2020 that I like unequivocally felt very positive about. And one of those is my clear Game of the Year. So we'll get to that. Then there's the meh 5, which are games that I finished and I enjoyed, kind of. Well, yeah, it's like games that I didn't dislike, but also had like pretty big issues with, right? And then finally, there's the bottom 2. The bottom 2 are just the 2 games that I had immense dislike for, or like that like really made me reconsider things with the medium as a whole, like in a negative sense. And that I came away with ultimately very disappointed, right? I'll first start by saying there's like a couple games that I played in 2020 there's a couple games that I played that sort of didn't fit any category super well. Like, I kind of liked them, but like I didn't play them enough, or I just wasn't that passionate about them. They had too many flaws. They're not that interesting to talk about, right? So the first one that I would mention, and that is purely because I didn't play it enough, is Neo 2. Neo 2 seems based as fuck, and I already liked, some of what I played of the first Neo, even though I thought it was kind of rough around the edges. It's just that with Neo, like, find you someone who loves you as much as Neo fans love Neo. Something about that game's fan base is so infectious, right? Just their love for the game naturally just makes you very interested in it. And I have high fucking respect for like the depth in it and the expression in it, right? I did feel, yeah, I got a good bit into Neo 2, and I was enjoying it. I was vibing with it. But I did feel like it was sort of in this weird limbo where I was either killing enemies really quickly, so that there was no real chance for expression, I guess, right? There was no real opportunity to actually flex on them. But then on the flip side, there was a lot of enemies that were so punishing and so hard that I could not afford to make any mistakes, right? I could not afford to take any risks, I felt like. But I feel like maybe I just need to get good, you know? Maybe I just need to get used to it. I did feel some of the system mechanics and like pacing that they changed in Neo 2 made the on-ramp a little more smooth compared to Neo 1. And like the bosses generally were less asshole-ish. So yeah, I really want to get into that game still. So that's like a big one that, you know, could have probably been a game of the year, right? If I played it more, but yeah. The rest I'm like less enthusiastic about, I guess. There was The Pathless. I wrote a review for it. You can read that. I'm backlogged. Just kind of has a message, right? But just the execution feels a little bit weak in a lot of places. I do genuinely like the movement mechanics and just the vibe of the game, right? But there's enough other stuff that kind of underwhelmed me with the bosses and just like a lot of the just the moments in the game were not emotionally powerful at all, and that felt significant when the game is like trying so hard to be Shadow of the Colossus and The Last Guardian and stuff like that. It just sets itself up for those comparisons in a very unfavorable way. So that was a little bit sad. I was pretty excited for the game, but like, yeah, you know, it was alright. I don't regret playing it. Another one was that I had high hopes for was Samurai Jack, the licensed game from I forget their name. I'm sorry, I forgot their name, unfortunately, but it's a new studio made up of mostly Team Ninja devs, like ex-Team Ninja devs. And the game has like some Ninja Gaiden DNA in it, but like with some interesting new mechanics like the rushing guard, and there's a grapple, and guns are kind of implemented in an interesting way. The game legitimately has interesting stuff going on as an action game, right? And like, you know, action games are still kind of a starved genre, right? With Platinum fucking about, and DMC5 was like 2 years ago at this point. Unfortunately, just toward the end, a lot of the enemies feel kind of like a slog to fight, and I was not just like a lot of health and like a lot of fucking yeah, it feels like you're styling on the health bar. You know, it's one of those games a little bit. There's cool skips you can do, right? There's like, you can take out things like really quickly if you're optimal, right? But there's like also weird resource systems, so when you're not super stocked up, it feels a little bit like you're fighting a losing battle. Honestly, it's been a while since I played it, so I can't really go into detail with it. Like, I thought it was interesting, I think it's worth playing, but like, it didn't really live up to my expectations. I barely played 13 Sentinels. I still want to get to that. The tutorial didn't really grab me, I gotta be honest. I do keep hearing that it's the weakest part of the game. But, yeah, I do think just aesthetically and just the concept of it seems very interesting, right? But, yeah, I was not hooked in the tutorial. And also, I guess my excuse is that the game actually technically came out in 2019 in Japan, yeah, so, maybe it doesn't count anyway. Maybe I don't need to talk about it in the context of this. Don't need to feel bad. Oh, I guess, you know, on the note of I mentioned DMC5 a little bit ago. I played DMC5 SE as well, and I was pretty let down with it, I gotta be honest. I think Turbo and LDK are really great additions that do spice up the game for me a good amount. I think LDK is nice because, like, it's, I think the DMD in 5 just feels kind of anemic after a while, and, I also didn't like that they didn't drop any Devil Breakers in the environment on DMD, right? So having Legendary Dark Knight makes me autopilot a little bit less, and also I can just kind of let loose, right? I don't need to save all my Devil Breakers all the time. So that's pretty neat. See, I've already talked for 12 minutes and I didn't even get to the actual list yet. It's just, what's disappointing about DMC5 SE is they did not address any of my biggest criticisms, right, with the game, where you still can't play any level with any character, even though we know it's, like, technically, it should be technically super easily possible, considering you can play every level with Virgil, right? So they made the levels work with Virgil, but not with Dante or V, right? The Nero level specifically, right? Where you do technically need the grapple, I guess, but it doesn't seem like something that would be that hard to do, so I don't know. And then they didn't adjust V at all, right? Even though so many people had so many criticisms with how V played and just the lack of precision with V, they didn't address that at all. They didn't fix the ranking in, like, Mission 10 at all. The fucked up sort of point requirement. There's still no inertia. There's still no reversals. Even though that was such a fucking huge outcry again. Yeah, I don't know. Like, yeah, I would say I enjoyed the time I spent with it, right? It's nice to have that complete feeling, well, kind of complete feeling version of the game on my PS5 now. But I still was, like, really left wanting more. Especially with how modding the PC version is kind of busted, right? Like, people always have problems with cheat engine and all this stuff. So it would have been just nice to have a consolidated version that actually addresses all the feedback that Capcom got in, like, the 1 year that they had, right? So that's disappointing. I feel like there was one more game. That I kind of played, but couldn't put on the list. I don't really remember. Maybe I'll think of it later, but, like, yeah, let's just move on for now. So now it's time for the bottom two. Start with the bottom two. And I'll start with the game that's, like, less egregious. That I actually had a great time with the first time I played it. When I first was in the process of finishing this game, I thought it was fucking incredible, right? That was my initial opinion of it. And I actually made a whole video on it on Patreon, and I regret it now. I regret a lot of things I said. I think even then, I was struggling to explain why I liked it so much, and I think that should have clued me in that it's not actually that good. And of course, the game I'm talking about is Doom Eternal. See, in Doom Eternal, I don't want to just shit on it. I don't think it's, like, wholly a bad game, but I do think it's misguided. To relay my basic experience with it a little bit, I played through it, right? Thought up to the final level, dude, this is like a 10 out of 10, right? I was having so much fucking fun. And then the final level was ass. The final level felt very thrown together, like, it was clearly based on one of the earlier levels in the city. Just, like, you're in the skyscrapers now, and it's very ugly, and it looks super unfinished, and you just go from one bland rooftop encounter to the next. Then you have just this really fucking shitty boss that, where it's just, you fucking hit the weak spots, right? Just very, very bad, very sour note to end the game on. But it was still like, okay, you know, I'm still positive on it. Still, overall, the experience was great. And then what happened is that I replayed a different shooter an older shooter from 2001, maybe 2002. I think it's 2001. I'll just say it. Like I'll talk about this game later in this video, but basically it's Halo. Halo Combat Evolved, original Halo. And what struck me about it is that even though it's all these fucking featureless tunnels, all these like textures being reused over and over again, very bland rooms, blah blah blah, right? I've even talked about this in the past, right? That just visually the game doesn't progress very well, right? It has a lot of redundancy. And despite all that, I like remember every fucking single encounter, right? Every encounter feels super different and has something really unique about it that stands out, right? And I was just playing and I was like, huh, I don't remember anything from Doom, even though it was only a couple months ago. By comparison, right? I compared them because they're both shooters, right? It was just natural to compare them. And I was enjoying Halo so much that it made me reassess, huh, maybe Doom Eternal is not the greatest shooter that I've ever played, right? Which, in hindsight, yeah, that was a way too fucking early. It was way too fucking early to call that, right? So I got kind of concerned, and then I went back to play Doom Eternal for the DLC. And wow, was that just a complete fucking shock. Just how artless and thrown together it felt. The way you just go from encounter to encounter to encounter, and there's no sense of pacing whatsoever, and just this idea that so many encounters, like, I mean, the DLC actually, it does spice it up a little bit, right? There's, you start on this kind of open platform, and there's, like, a lower, level that you can get to, and, like, the interplay between that is, like, something, right? But then, very quickly, you get back to, it's a fucking square arena, and you just circle strafe all over the place, and fucking hit all your panic buttons, right? I'm gonna get into that a little more soon. And what really sealed the deal in a bad way with the DLC is seeing the big fucking new enemy that they did for it, which is literally a turret. It's literally just an automated turret that pops up every now and again, and we have to shoot the eye. We have to shoot the big weak point. And I was like, wow, the new fucking enemy that you thought of for this DLC is a turret. And it's just like, and with a big obvious weak spot, right? It does one thing and has a big obvious weak spot. And that just really exemplified all my issues with the game. It was a microcosm for all the shit that was like nagging at me ever since I had finished it. You know, I kinda did have some doubts about that impression, right? I was like, okay, maybe I'm too hard on it, right? Maybe I'm just too... It was just too much of a shock to see what the game actually is, right? Maybe I need to give it some time, get used to it again. And then I downloaded it again on with the PS5 update that they recently did, right? And obviously it's hard to deny that the game is just very kinesthetically pleasing on a very basic level, and there's some fun mechanics in there. So I wouldn't call it wholly bad or anything, but I still just lost interest in it very quickly, and I was not... I played, like, the first level again, and I was just like, oh, okay, I think I'm good. And, it made me reassess Doom 2016 as well, and I just don't really care for the newer Doom games anymore. See, I said earlier, that you just hit your panic buttons or whatever in Doom Eternal. And that's really the thing, right? Doom Eternal is just a series of panic buttons. They created all these arbitrary fucking problems for you to just respond to perfectly with the one button that was made for that problem. And see, I think one of the truths in game design, and specifically player research, is that people, or players, I should say, players love feeling like they're doing something conscious, right? They love the feeling of like, oh, I made the conscious effort to counterplay the specific thing correctly, right? That's why parries, for example, right? Parrying games is like inherently kind of reactive, right? It's not really a form of expressive gameplay. Well, it can be, right? There's obviously some exceptions. But let's just assume it's not the most expressive you can be, generally. But for a lot of people, it feels awesome specifically because they feel like they're more consciously responding to the situation, right? Than they would be if they just mash a button, right? Which, you have to understand, that's how a lot of people play games, right? They don't super consciously think about every problem. That's why you get normies talking about Devil May Cry the way they do. Where they will say, oh, you do, or a game like Metal Gear Solid 5, right? They will do the bare minimum, get through it with very little effort, and then say, oh yeah, well, I didn't need to do any of the other shit, right? And why Devil May Cry gameplay from someone who's not super experienced with it and not super ambitious with it looks so awkward. You're not gonna look smooth and comfortable with the game unless you actually put in the effort, right? I think that very, very directly aligns with the average person's playing habits and preferences, right? So, for a designer, I guess there is a temptation to make the player feel that sense of conscious decision-making, right? And you look at something like the chainsaw in Doom Eternal, right? When you really get down to it, there's absolutely no... And people who like Doom Eternal, they will... I've had discussions about it, right? They will confirm the same thing. Yeah, the chainsaw has absolutely no fucking reason to exist, right? Ammo might as well be infinite. For those who don't know, the chainsaw is on a cooldown. It comes back regularly, and the game spawns all these cannon fodder enemies that die with a single chainsaw hit. And that will restore your ammo, right? Killing the enemies with the chainsaw drops a fuck ton of ammo, and then you can keep on fighting, right? And in Doom Eternal, the biggest, like, the two changes that they made is A, the chainsaw is on a cooldown, right? And B, your ammo is way more limited. You run out of ammo way faster. But you don't run out of ammo so fast that you don't have access to the chainsaw first, right? Generally, the experience I had is that you can churn through about one weapon before the chainsaw comes back, right? So ammo, like, you really wonder why the fuck is it even like this? Because I talked about this months ago, right, when I sort of first started expressing doubts about Doom Eternal. Where I was like, yeah, like, I don't see the point of the chainsaw, and then people said to me, yeah, well, getting up close to enemies and stuff, and, like, having to slow down, I guess, you're taking a bit of a risk, right? But, like, if it's something number one, I don't actually think the risk is that real, right? I played the whole game on Ultra Nightmare, not Ultra Nightmare, sorry, on Ultra Violence, and there was never really a situation where, getting close, again, they specifically spawn the cannon fodder enemies, right? Specifically for this purpose. And you have so many movement options. You have the dash, you have the grapple, the meat hook, yeah, that's what it's called. You can chainsaw and then just immediately dash out of there, right? And you can approach them just as quickly. So really, there is no risk involved with that, in my opinion. I never really had that experience, right? But even then, it's not like it's a risk-reward kind of thing, because it's a risk that you have to take. Even if it were a risk, right? It's a risk that you would have to take, because you're literally out of ammo, right? And sort of related to that is the fact that they gave the enemies these very specific weak spots, right? Where they have armor, or they have extra weapons and shit, right? And they're basically very hard to fight unless you take those out first, right? And you have a little bit of freedom with how you do that. Generally, with like little mini turrets on the enemies themselves, you can either plant a bomb, or you can use the sniper mode on the assault rifle. So it's not. I liked on my first playthrough that it's not such a hard requirement, right? It's not literally DMC color coding, but it's still really useful to just use the correct weapon, right, for that purpose. And that just means you're even more shoehorned into getting back ammo when the game wants you to, right? Because you don't switch weapons when you want to switch weapons. You switch weapons when the game tells you, yeah, it's a good idea to do that right now. And see, that difference may be a little bit hard to understand, right? I think, again, Halo really recontextualized it, right? And Halo is a very different kind of game with a 2-weapon limit, right? And the whole idea of having to pick stuff up on the battlefield, that is very unique to Halo. But generally, you're thinking about your ammo and your weapons way more long-term, right? Like, when you have access to a rocket launcher, it's this really special thing. And you really try to get the most use out of it that you can before you expend it, right? Or before you have to replace it with a different weapon. Inevitably, right? You may get to a section where the rocket launcher is like not very useful, and I guess that's the thing, right? They in a game like Doom Eternal, because all the weapons are available all the time. That's the thing. It's not even like older Doom games or older shooters where, yeah, you literally have access to all the weapons all the times, right? It's not even like that. You still, in those older games, you still had to worry about ammo, right? You couldn't, and a weapon like the rocket launcher had really significant drawbacks, right? You had to really worry about the splash damage with how crammed, in a game like Quake, how crammed the environments are, right? In Doom Eternal, it never feels that way, right? It's everything is like really spread out, and the weapons have they have no distinct weaknesses or drawbacks, but at the same time, they're not that powerful, right? A rocket launcher in Doom Eternal is not as useful as it would be in most other shooters, right? And that is literally because the ammo is so not even plentiful, it's infinite, right? You can just get ammo back whenever you want, right? So of course, individual weapons like the rocket launcher are not going to feel special. Instead, it's going to be all about the game just telling you to use it at the right moment. And that's like on top of just that whole system, right? Where I feel like the grenades are on cooldown, right? So I always just throw out the grenades willy-nilly. Obviously, I get that you can optimize the game way more, right? I get that. I heard a lot of it, like, flattening enemies and sort of interrupting their animations and stuff. You can... I'm sure you can get really nitty-gritty and fucking optimal, and there's, like, movement tech and stuff that's pretty cool in the game, right? But... It really, when you try to think back on it, it really just feels like this big mess where nothing matters, right? Everything just bleeds together, because so little in the combat actually has impact, right? Individual actions don't have impact. It's just this complete maximalist sensory overload, and that's, again, like I was trying to say earlier, on top of the game just being so artless with its pacing, for the most part. I do think the game has, like, some cool environments and all that shit. But, yeah, I don't really... I wonder if people are... I think it's weird, right? A lot of the initial divisive response to Doom Eternal was just because people thought it's too hard or whatever. I didn't think it was too hard at all, but that's not my problem with it. My problem is just that I don't remember anything, and like every fucking encounter feels the same, right? And that's why the idea of a bloody palace, for example, in Doom Eternal is hilarious to me, because it would just be hours of literally the same combat with the same arenas, which is what the game already is, right? It's just like, I feel like it doesn't matter where the enemies are coming from. The level design barely matters, right? Because your movement is so permissive with the dash as well. I feel like building the game around the meat hook more centrally might have been a better idea, right? And like, even though when I was playing it the first time, it felt like, yeah, I'm not using the other weapons unless the game introduces another one of those arbitrary problems, right? Unless I have a fucking guy with armor or something, right? Because the weapons by themselves are not actually that useful. They don't actually have intrinsic utility. I don't really know how to explain the difference exactly, but it really does just feel like this key and lock kind of thing. Versus, yeah, a rocket launcher in Halo just has high fucking splash damage and blah, right? It's useful for that reason, and then you have to weigh up the situations where it might be useful. So yeah, that's Doom Eternal. I don't know. Just very disappointing in retrospect, and I mean, there's like other things, like I think the meat hook movement is cool. I think ballista boosting seems really neat. I didn't really mess around with it myself, but especially because it's awkward to do on a controller. Yeah, I'm a controller peasant. But I didn't actually like the dash, for example. It doesn't really have any natural inertia, right? You don't really retain your momentum after a dash. And there's just still, kind of like Doom 2016, so many little things in the design that are just badly considered. I hate that there's the blood punch, right? Which is also, actually it's not on a cooldown, right? You just, the more you kill enemies, it charges up your blood punch. That's fine, right? I don't have a problem with that. But then it's very useful to punch armor off of some enemies. But then some of them will just have, instantly after that, they will have this AoE attack, right? That you can't realistically dodge, right? And to me, it's very weird to literally tell the player, yeah, when you see the armor guy, you should run up to him and do the armor punch, right? The blood punch. And then immediately punish them with this AoE attack that they didn't see coming. And the same is still true with the glory kills, right? The glory kills are one of the stupidest fucking systems ever. Because guess what? The idea is like, oh, you glory kill to get more health back. Well, glory kills, they guarantee that you get health back, right? Even when, yeah, from basically every enemy you get a little bit of health, right? But you don't actually get a lot of health unless you are at low health yourself, right? And when you're at low health, you can also just kill the enemies from afar, and that will also give you health, right? It will also give you a lot of health. The glory kill itself, therefore, has way less bearing on how much health you get than whether you're already low health or not, right? I don't know, is that confusing? Like, if you've played it, you probably know what I mean. So, when you go for the glory kill, you don't get iframes or anything after it, right? So, you're super fucking punishable, right? I had so many situations in 2016 especially where I specifically went for the glory kill to heal up, and then by the time I actually got the health, the enemies were already shitting on me again, right? In a way that I couldn't really react to. And I actually have less health now than what I started with. In Eternal, they addressed it a tiny bit. Number one, because of the dash, right? You can get out of those situations a little more quickly. But also because you pick up the health more quickly, right? There's a less of a delay between the health dropping and you absorbing it. But still, it is just better in most situations to kill the enemies from afar. And then it really makes you wonder, like, this mechanic, what were they thinking with it? Because it just conditions you to play the game badly, you know? So, yeah, I think the new Doom games are just really... And it's disappointing, right? Because I sung their praises, right? I loved 2016 when it came out. But I think they're really just they're aesthetic over substance here. And They want the aesthetic of like tactical, fast-paced shooter, right? But it's just a fucking mess. And I guess in retrospect, I do respect OG Doom 2016. Doom 2016. I respect that one a little bit more. Because at least it got the ammo system right. At least it didn't have the stupid weak points. Yeah. But Doom Eternal for me is kind of a bust. Yeah. But still not as bad as the next game we're going to talk about. Which is Final Fantasy VII Remake. Fuck. Oh god. I actually did a whole review of it already. That is still accurate to my feelings. It still reflects my feelings. And you're going to be able to see that review. Actually, I'm just going to link it, like, under this video, right now. But it's also just going to be up. You're going to see it in your sub box, like, in a couple of weeks, probably. Because I'm unlocking all my old Patreon videos, bit by bit, on the main channel. So you should see it there, but again, like I said, I'm just gonna link it here right now, so you can just watch it if you want. So I'm wondering how much detail should I go with this. It's just FF7 Remake. I realized in hindsight, it really radicalized me. You know, it really made me understand what I don't like with games in general, right? And it represents everything bad to me that a game can do, right? It's just this really fucking shallow, just so painfully built on nostalgia and, like, just this shitty fucking Kingdom Hearts thing of stringing fans along with the story that is clearly made up as it goes, right? Where it really makes me wonder, how do people still give a shit about this? How do people get invested in this when it's so clearly artificial, right? And like, I respect some of the thematic concepts in FF7 Remake that are presented toward the end, but the game itself doesn't actually do anything to substantiate those ideas, right? It doesn't actually put anything on the table that sort of justifies the remake by itself already. You know, the first part of it. Yeah, you might say the later games might capitalize on it, but like, I already don't care anymore, right? I'm already out. I'm not gonna play the other games. And yeah, it's, oh god, dude. Just I consider the fact I was in chapter 18, which is one of the final chapters. I was that far into the game, and I was ready to quit. Like, I already thought the game was bad up to that point, right? I already did not like it. But then that chapter by itself was so horrendously fucking awful. Again, for those who don't know, like, your party is split up into 2 teams. And there's no way, for most materia, right? Materia are your big abilities. You equip the materia and then your character can do the thing, right? Most materia, or a lot of the more useful ones, you only have one version of. And there's no way to easily transfer the setups between your 2 teams, right? So every time there's a forced switch between the 2 teams, you have to do like at least 10 minutes of like fucking menuing again, right? And it's just such a microcosm, because like microcosm of all the game's problems, because why am I doing the menuing? Because when I get into a fight, it's so dependent on the right setup that either I will, like, halfway through the fight, I will realize, oh shit, my setup is bad. Either I will slog through the rest of the fight anyway and just hate my life, or I will reset and change my setup, right? And you do this every fucking time, right? And there's nothing that mechanically compelling about the game that you're playing to really justify all that nonsense, right? It's just this really rigid-ass, not real action game. Like, it might as well... it is cool that you can queue up sort of attacks from different party members, right? And, like, build these really perfect sequences and take down enemies super efficiently, right? It has the FF13 system where you stagger them and then you can just wail them, right? And if you time everything perfectly, it's beautiful. Unfortunately, the game just puts every fucking possible roadblock in your way to make that process as painful as possible. With, like, all the forced cutscene transitions and damage gating. There's so many points where the boss will transition into their next phase at a very designated point, and you might reach that point and be perfectly ready to just wail on them now, but because you hit that trigger, they're now transitioning into their next phase and just eating all your damage, right? All your damage just that you were about to do evaporates into nothing. And there really is no sort of infrastructure in place for you to actually master the combat on offer within the confines of the campaign, right? And it's laughable that fans of this game will tell you, oh, you can do the VR missions, or oh, you just play on hard mode. I, like, hated the game so much already. Do you think it's a reasonable proposition to say, oh, you can't hate on the game unless you play it on hard mode again? Fuck off. Oh my god, I had to get water after that rant. And see, it's like the whole point of this remake was to expand stuff, right? And the reality is that the characters just talk about fucking nothing. Like, everything they say is so matter-of-fact. It's so... literally, you're going through this linear-ass tunnel. It's a literally straight line. And Tifa will just say, I hope we don't get lost. I think we gotta fucking look out for the clues that they left so we don't get lost. And there's a level design that's literally a straight... Like, what an insult to your intelligence that you present the player with literally a straight line, right? That's the level design. And then you try to bake it into the story like, oh man, our fucking support guys, they were here before and they put like all this graffiti on the wall so we don't get lost. Where is there to get lost? How do you get lost in this level design? Like, see, I mean, this game dropped the same year as Cyberpunk. I didn't play Cyberpunk, but I'm sure Cyberpunk is bad, right? But I couldn't help but like, because they're both sort of big sci-fi cities, whatever, right? I couldn't just help but make that comparison, like, Cyberpunk, at least, like, I'm in a city, right? I'm walking around, I'm in a world, there's, like, people walking around clearly having some kind of own life. And then FF7 Remake, everything is such a fucking facade. It feels way more artificial than the PS1 game that it's remaking, right? It feels so much more outdated already. And again, kind of like I said, you know, the way they're sort of banking on the aesthetic and the nostalgia, it really just makes me wonder, like, I feel like you just need to be a really specific kind of player to be okay with this, right? With this kind of game and with this kind of storytelling. Because I feel like there's barely anything of substance there, right? To justify... Like, there's these tiny character moments, right? Between Cloud and Aerith, for example, that are nice. But goddamn, you cannot tell me that spread out over this fucking 40-hour nightmare of just really rigid controls and level design and awkward dialogue, bad cutscenes, like characters literally with automated lip movements and sort of gestures, right? And like environments that look way worse than the original, artistically and even technically, yeah. You can't tell me that that's a good proposition, right? That's a good time. I don't get it. I do not fucking get the appeal of this game at all. Like I said, to me, it's everything bad about video games. And again, just to drive the point home, right? I think, just like I said this on my, I also did a backlogged review, right? Oh yeah, I forgot. I did 2 reviews of this game. Whoa, that's crazy. One on YouTube and one on backlog, yeah. And it's just the final boss. It's so hilarious because I just know people play this and they think, oh shit, it's like Devil May Cry. Ooh, it's so cool. But like I just said, it's hilarious, and what I mean is that it's so transparent that it's like trying to be this epic fucking anime-ass fight, but it's still working with just NES game rules, you know? Where, the only way you can actually tell what the boss is about to do is because they have a big name over their head for the next attack, right? The title of the attack is floating over their head. Not like from the animation naturally, right? And if you don't already know the attack, you don't know what the fuck you can do, right? You have no clear indication if it's blockable, if it's dodgeable. The dodge doesn't have iframes, right? You have 50 different fucking counter moves that all have slightly different conditions, right? And that don't always work consistently. And it's like, again, kind of what I implied with Devil May Cry earlier. It's hard not for me to feel that a lot of people will look at this and not see the difference between a game like DMC and this, because it's aesthetics over actual substance, right? A game like Devil May Cry is like, it's so natural and so intuitive, right? I press the button and I hit the enemy with my sword and they react to it, right? It's not this just NES fucking RPG Dragon Quest ass nonsense, but coded up as this PS4 mega game, you know? Fuck, man. Oh. It's like we can only really talk about how games try to sort of advance the medium like thematically and narratively, but we don't pay attention to mechanics at all. We don't actually pay attention to how much we're regressing in terms of mechanics, right? And yeah, fuck this game. That's all I gotta say about it. Last thing I'll say on FF7, FF15 was better. FF15 was actually better, and Kingdom Hearts 3 as well. Even though those games are like kusuge, you know, and very rough around the edges, still better than this fucking abomination. Oh, I hate it so fucking much. So that's the bottom 2. I hope this section will go a little bit faster because I'm less emotional about the next 5 games overall. So let's not waste any time. Next game on the list is Spider-Man Miles Morales. Don't have anything to say about it, honestly, really. I enjoyed my time with it. I guess in light of the whole Insomniac stuff recently, I'm feeling kind of weird about it now, right? I'm like, okay. Like, I don't think I want to buy any more Insomniac games in the foreseeable future. To be honest with you. But, yeah, I thought it was decent. I think they added some nice new moves, for Miles. I think the Venom shit opens up the combat, in some nice ways. And I did enjoy the combat originally already, right? In Peter Parker's Marvel's Sony Spider-Man for the Sony PlayStation 4 amateur / professional. I did enjoy that combat. But I think the issue with Miles is just it does not feel like a substantial story or game or whatever, right? It doesn't really have great moments. It feels like kind of very basic scenarios sort of strung together into like this mini campaign that doesn't really do the character justice. And I just really noticed when I was doing side quests, okay, it's just very fucking bare bones. You just walk from A to B, and then you have some story showered over you. It's just not my preference. I still think, again, like, combat's surprisingly cool in these newer Spider-Man games. I just wish The swinging mechanics were a little bit more technical, and I wish they just captured the experience of being Spider-Man more, right? I wish they captured the responsibility of being Spider-Man more. You don't really get that from Spider-Man video games at all, honestly. And obviously I'm not the first person to say that either, right? A lot of people have made this one. But, like, yeah, that's all I gotta say about it. This one's a little more controversial, I guess. It's The Last of Us 2. The Last of Us 2 is weird because, I was, like, pretty affected by a lot of it. And I enjoyed a lot of the game. But in the end, it left me feeling very empty. I gotta be honest, like, as much as the ending for me worked when it happened, the more I, like, reflected on it, I realized that I'm not reflecting on it at all. Yeah. It feels very just neat and tidy, and, like, there was not much to be learned in the end, honestly. Yeah, and I can totally see that that may have been exactly what they were going for, right? Like, they specifically wanted closure with this game. I can totally see that. But, I'll say, sort of more broadly speaking, more generally speaking, I should say, yeah. The game is split into two distinct halves, right? And Naughty Dog at this point themselves have revealed more about the game, right? For marketing purposes. But I don't want to talk about it too much. I don't want to spoil it in case you still want to play it, right? I'll just say, the second half of the game, by design, feels a lot more set-piece driven. And I don't like that. I liked the approach that they went with in the first half that felt pretty different, honestly, for a Naughty Dog game, where you're playing as Ellie, right, and you're very much by yourself the whole fucking time. There's no one to talk to for a lot of it. And you're just kind of seamlessly going from environment to environment and, like, into very emergent scenarios, right? It doesn't feel so driven by hard set pieces, more like, yeah, I'm in this new environment and there's, like, enemies everywhere and it's very open, right? I thought that was very fucking cool, and it was just a kind of pacing that I wasn't expecting from the game, and a kind of darkness and isolation that I wasn't expecting from the game, right? I think they conveyed that sense really well. And it tied in really fucking well with the new mechanics, right? I loved sort of cramming through little nooks and holes in the environment and crawling on the ground and sneaking through the grass and stuff, right? It's not... the Nakey Jakey video on this game is great, and I agree with a lot of it. And you can definitely say, yeah, it's not the fucking most advanced stealth mechanics. But it's still really good. I still... just on a mechanical level, I thought you were making pretty relevant choices, and the upgrades felt pretty meaningful. And I do think the saves are kind of weird, because you find these saves in the environment that you can unlock, but you don't even need the code for them. You can just listen to the vibration, feel for the vibration, I should say. And if you do that, you can unlock it without the code, and that's kind of cool, but also, they don't vary that up at all, right? Like, once you figured out the trick, it's like, alright. And I think you do kind of spend way too much time just kind of pointlessly gathering stuff. I wouldn't say pointlessly, but, like, you do spend a lot of time just exploring to gather ammo and shit. And it feels good to have this optional area, and then you get another item slot or something, right? That's like a super fucking huge upgrade, and it feels very rewarding to take that risk, right? To venture into the unknown and then get a really nice, useful reward from that. It drives home the survival kind of sense. But as the second half just got more and more linear, that sort of ammo gathering and resource gathering felt way more like a formality, right? In the first half, with the more open level design, I think it worked a little better, because you had to go out of your way for it a little bit. It's just mostly the fact that I think the second half, I totally see what they were going for, and I guess that's kind of the problem, right? I think the writing in this game is just so transparent in how it makes you want to feel. And The second half for me just completely killed the momentum of the story. I can't say it any other way. Like, I was not up. I was ready for the game to like end, right? And then the second half kind of happens and changes a lot, and then it feels like it derails the game for another 10 hours, and then you only get to the ending, and by that point it's like it's a very awkward and unsatisfying, right? And that's really my biggest problem with the game. And like I could say, yeah, again, Nakey Jakey analyzes very well thematically. I think, you know, I respect that for Neil Druckmann, this game comes from a very personal place. I can totally show admiration for that, right? But at the same time, I just think it's not effective, right? I think the idea of, yeah, I want the player to feel hate, it's an interesting idea, right? But like, you can't bank the whole experience on that, right? Because it should be obvious that that's just not achievable. Like, not all players are going to respond to it that way that you want them to. And for me, it did not work at all, right? For me, I was not on board with Ellie's motivations, right? We were not really in alignment, me and Ellie. And so a lot of the violence that was acted out over the course of the game, to me, felt very hollow, right? I was like, yeah, you know, I don't care that I'm doing this, right? I don't want to, I know I don't want to do this, and I know I don't want to see this quest through that bad that I would act the same way that Ellie does, right? So for me, I'm not saying the game even is trying to make you feel guilty, right? Like, the guilt doesn't have to be the point, but it's like, I don't even feel investment, you know? I just feel like, yeah, alright, like, I guess I'm doing that. Like, it's more that these actions are super shocking, more due to their graphic nature than because of emotional investment, right? For me, it's not a burden. For me, it's not like this steep fucking hurdle this emotional hurdle that I need to overcome to progress, right? I'm just like, yeah, for me, it's a formality because I don't really care that much. So for me, that aspect just does not work, and the second half does not work, and I think it's very sad because I feel like if they just I think the second half has great moments, by the way. There's moments that I got really attached to, and I think there's cool characters, right? I think there is good elements in there, right? That's why it's so sad, because I feel like if they just reorganized the game in some way, right? If they restructured it, if they rethought some things, we could have had something really fucking special. But as it stands, it's not something that I would be keen to revisit, to be honest with you. So I just want to clarify, I said that I had admiration for the fact that this is a personal topic for Druckmann. What I meant with that is that he is Israeli, and he structured the story of this game in a way that's clearly very analogous to the Israel-Palestine conflict. Now, I can acknowledge that for him, there's a lot of horrible events that happened, right, that he's had to deal with and that he had a hard time accepting, right? The reality of the situation, though, is that Israel is oppressing Palestine, and for me, as like someone who grew up in a Muslim household, especially, obviously it's abhorrent either way, right? But for me, it just hits especially close to home, and it especially hits close to home how people that I personally feel very close to are so dehumanized, and it's really fucked up when you see interviews with people in Israel who just feel absolutely no sympathy for Palestinian Muslims. And yeah, this game serving as this vague analog for the conflict, if you specifically view it under that lens, it does feel a little bit weird, right? That, oh, clearly the Palestine analog of the scholars that live on this tiny island, and they're religious fanatics and shit, right? Is very weird, and I don't like it. one of the characters is Jewish, and she gets like a whole segment where you explore the synagogue and where she tells you a lot about her culture, right? And I'm not saying the scars don't get the same chance to explore their culture in a positive light. That is true, but at the same time, when you're using Israel, when you're vocal about the fact that you're using Israel Palestine as an analog in your game, right, for your story, it feels not very fair to not have a Muslim character in the game, or like a character that's openly Muslim, to validate their culture, right, and to illuminate things from their perspective. And again, clearly, to reiterate with that, there's absolutely no uncertainty. Again, Palestine Muslims are being oppressed by Israel. There's no other way to read that. And again, I don't want to assume too much about Drugman's opinions on this conflict and on what's happening there. See, right now I'm feeling, I should go on his Twitter. And did he say anything, this year? Did he say anything about it? I don't know. Like, thinking about it this way again makes me very sour on the game, And I absolutely think you should think about media this way, right? I think you should think about this kind of thing critically. And I guess I'm a little bit let down that there was this one article, I think, on the Washington Post. I'm gonna link it here for sure, where they go into it, right? And they have a similar perspective to me, where they're like, like, we can kind of see that maybe it's not super reflective of the author's views, right, on the actual real-world conflict, but it's still a very ham-fisted usage of that imagery and of those real-world analogs. And I guess it's just something that I wish people were more conscious about when they consume stuff. As much as, as you could see, largely, it didn't negatively impact my opinion on the game too much, sort of in the moment. When I think about it, it does make me very sour, but I wouldn't say that makes it a harmful game, right, necessarily. It's just very much worth pointing out that our perspective is never illuminated in the media like that, right? We never get our pop culture moments. We never get people in pop culture, people in art speak up for Arab Muslims, Middle Eastern people, because it's just not cool, I guess. And that's shit, and that sucks, and I hate it. And this game makes me think of that a lot. Next game on the list is a huge change of pace, Crash 4. I was like kind of excited for it, based on just how visually appealing it looked, and some of the movements tech that I saw looked pretty cool. And I think the biggest criticism that people will say is that, or fans of Crash, they will say, the getting 100% of this game is ridiculous, right? That's what I keep hearing. I don't have the problem because I don't care, right? I don't want to get the 100%. Because I'm not a compulsive person, and I don't let my life be controlled by video games that clearly are designed to steal my time. Just a bit of a tangent as I refill my water. It's just like, it's the exact kind of platformer that I don't care about. I don't care about like this trial and error stuff, and a lot of this game is just shit that you can't really know what to do unless you die to it first, right? That's why this game, to me, doesn't feel challenging. I never felt like it was challenging. I felt like, it was just a formality. It was an inevitability that at some point I get through. I just need to see these obstacles enough times to at some point be able to overcome them. The final couple levels really they drove it home for me, I guess, because that's where they actually really start to combine a lot of the different masks and stuff, where you need to flip-flop between different abilities very rapidly, right? And that's, I guess, kind of, sort of, input-wise kind of enjoyable, right? Physically enjoyable. But I also realized, wow, a lot of my deaths are because, it's hard to get used to all these things in sequence, right? By the time, like, you have such a long sequence of things that you need to do without mistakes, that once you get hit at the very end, you've forgotten all the shit at the start again, right? And then you die to the shit at the start again until you're used to it again, and then you die to the shit at the very end, right? It's just this very punishing trial and error kind of game, and I think, to me, what makes it feel so lazy is just the fact that you die in one hit. I think when you die in one hit, you don't actually need interesting obstacles to kill the player, right? You can, and that's the thing with this game, right? A lot of the things that you do are not hard, right? It's just that the leeway is so low that just forgetting how to deal with a certain obstacle is enough to kill you, right? And set you back a lot and extend the playtime in that way, right? It doesn't really take that clever fucking obstacle design to make this game a certain playtime, right? And that's just really uninteresting to me, and I just didn't fucking care for it. And yeah, like, you have the slide spin, and that's just very satisfying to do, right? But again, the levels are just so not permissive and punish mistakes so hard that, yeah, like, if you want to play in like a kinesthetically kind of satisfying way, right? If you want to move through levels quickly, you put yourself at exponentially more risk, and arguably just way too much risk, right? If you want to play this game like efficiently, right? So I just find that, I just think so discouraging experimentation and actually using the mechanics that are there so much is something that I just can't really get down with. So I think the game looks great. I did not fucking care about the cutscenes at all. I did not care about the story. I did not laugh at all. I just think the jokes are, like, the jokes, for what they are, they're well-timed and stuff, right? But it's just, they're just kind of obvious fucking cartoon jokes, I don't know. I've seen definitely worse with games, right? But I think the game genuinely feels really good to control, right? I think Crash has a nice amount of heft to him, and again, the slide spin is really cool to execute. But I think just the fact that you die in one hit, that kills it, because it means the obstacles don't even have to be that interesting, right? So that's Crash. So next game is Hades, and Hades is probably the most universally liked game last year. Yeah, fucking, just a very much a feel-good story. I watched the No Clip documentary. I think Supergiant Games are a very likable studio. I think that's all great. I think the game has very likable qualities. But with Hades, my experience with it was that, number one, I was very much flip-flopping between feeling it, like, yeah, this is working for me, this feels good, right? And also just being really fucking pissed off at points. And, it's just that, like, that's one thing, right? But it's also really, when I think about the experience now, it's just that philosophically, I cannot agree with this game. With the design of this game. This game is not a skill-based game. And, like, I should have known this, right? Literally, the pitch of this game is, yeah, it gets easier when you die, right? And, on a very basic level, this is a game where you mash attack and then dodge at the right time. And maybe that sounds very reductive, right? But I could not, by the end of it, I finished the whole thing, right? I finished the story. I didn't do, like, the epilogue shit, but, yeah. By the end of it, I could not tell you what I actually learned, how I actually improved as a player, right? And to me, that's, like, kind of a bad sign with a roguelike or an arcade game or anything like that. This game is entirely built on grinding and builds, right? Build on builds. Built on coming up with builds, right? And I guess that's, you know, with a lot of roguelikes, that's the whole point, right? That's what people find enjoyable about it. When you go on YouTube and you look at all these people with, like, the craziest, with, like, 300 hours of gameplay, what they do is they have these insanely fucking overpowered builds, where they grind it out every god, right? And all the weapons and shit. And that gives them access to these builds, right? And I think that already illustrates the problem, right? That basically the way it works is that when you go on a run, you regularly come across different gods, right? And they can give you boons. And boons are just upgrades. They enhance your innate abilities, right? So you can put like thunder damage on a specific attack, or even your dodge, for example, right, would count. The game systemically kind of works that you can just put, for example, the thunder element on, like I said, the dodge, right, and then it just does thunder damage when you dodge, right? It just works, and it's kind of very open in a way, which is cool. And then I guess the idea is you can figure out, oh, okay, there's some things that just naturally make sense together, right? When you have the spinning shield that does very continuous damage, it makes sense to pair it with a buff that gives me some sort of significant advantage the more it's applied, right? So, for example, I think the Aphrodite thing, if you put that, for example, on your rotating shield attack, it would slow down the enemies continuously, right? That's not the best combo, right? But it's an example that I just had. And then Athena, generally, she is all about blocking. So if you put Athena's power on your dodge, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because the dodge itself becomes way safer, right? You can just dodge into things. And the dodge has some iframes, right? But, like, it just gets even more safe that way. So that is an interesting system. But, like, the way it sort of works structurally is that you can give ambrosia to the gods, I think, or you can just give some shit to them, right? And then they will give you a keepsake, and then you can level up this keepsake, and when you carry it with you, the more it's leveled up, the higher the chance is that you will encounter that god, right? Generally, it's like when you first put on the keepsake, the first god that you encounter should be of that keepsake, right? But then also, they have a chance of appearing throughout the run again and again, and it makes sense to like specialize in a few gods versus spreading yourself out, right? Because a lot of the abilities are cumulative. So that's an interesting idea for like meta strategy, right? The problem is that the boons get so much more fucking useful the more time you put into the keepsakes, right? The more you level them up. And the same is true with your weapons, right? Your weapons also have upgrades. And to go back to the shield example, right? You can throw the shield and it rotates and does continuous damage. Well, guess what? If you upgrade the shield, you can not just throw one shield, but like 2 or 3 or 5 or 6 shields at once, right? And obviously that's a huge fucking advantage. And see, I don't really know how to relay that to people. I think for most people that doesn't sound bad at all, right? For most people it's like, yo, that seems fun, right? Like that I just get stronger if I upgrade myself. The thing is, upgrading yourself is always, well, it's not necessarily connected to dying, right? But the idea is that even if you fail, you can just put points into that, and then the game just gets progressively easier, right? I felt like my success in the game was so out of my hands, right? The game was just, again, like I said, getting progressively easier, and I didn't really have to do much. And whenever a build wasn't working, right? Whenever I didn't get the thing that I wanted, right? Even though I'm equipping the right keepsake, I know exactly what ability I want, right, to make this build work. If I don't get this one ability, it feels like shit. It feels fucking awful, right? It's so insanely fucking frustrating. You wouldn't even believe how annoyed I got, right? Where I would get all the way to Elysium, right, which is the penultimate area of the game. I saw, like, I was sort of scrubbing through the footage that I had on the hard drive of my just random gameplay, right? Not even just Hades. But I saw this Hades gameplay, and I saw that I just quit out of the game in the penultimate area because I realized, yeah, my build was shit, right? And with this build, I just can't, like, it's not even worth trying anymore, yeah? Because it's so clear that the game is not based on skill, right? It's trying to actually just react and then wail away at enemies is such an exercise in tedium. Because if your build is not effective, you're not going to do enough damage, the enemies are going to turn into sponges, and the screen is also so fucking chaotic that, I Unless, again, the shield is great because you can block, right, with it, and that feels very consistent. Generally, the polish of the game is commendable, right? It feels like a very accommodating, nicely made action game. But at some point, there's just so much shit on the screen, and clearly they're very okay with you getting hit. You know, it's not a game that's really designed to be like no hit cleared. And to me, when RPG elements have such a huge fucking influx on the whole experience, that feels very bad, right? In the context of an action game, right? In an RPG, inherently, you kind of accept that. In a turn-based RPG, right? In a turn-based RPG, you inherently kind of accept that you get hit, right? Like, it's inevitable. In an action game, that is so much harder to rationalize in my mind, right? I'm not okay with it, and I'm like, even if I can realistically get through the situation because my build is good enough, it still doesn't feel good that I can't overcome that with skill, right? But again, for me, that's even the damage is comparatively a minor point. It's really more that playing with a shitty build is very unsatisfying, and the way that you don't play with a shitty build, right? The way that you ensure that your build is good is by grinding, right? By just playing the game a lot. And that's something that philosophically I have a huge fucking problem with. I think that really makes the game just not respect your time. And obviously people are going to say, oh, well, have you seen the level 0 runs? You know, like people play this game with no upgrades at all, play through it, right? But it's like, okay, if you do that, what is left, right? What are you doing even? You're, like I said at the start, you're playing this really basic action game where you like mash attack and dodge sometimes, right? That's not that compelling. I think stripping out the builds and the upgrades and all that stuff gets rid of what makes the game fun to people in the first place, right? That is the whole point. I mean, I don't want to definitively say that's the point of the game, right? I hate like talking about intent and whatever, right? Enjoy the game however you want. Just the way I see it, there's nothing interesting about the game unless you have this whole build system, right? And I do legitimately think it's an interesting system, right? It's just not something that appeals to me at all. And I think I don't know, I can't really, in good faith, like, recommend it and stuff because it's just so shallow, you know? To me, it feels like a very shallow time investment. And there's just other things like, the heat system, for example, is kind of poorly thought out because there's all these... The heat system, basically, you increase the game's difficulty to get more upgrades, right? To get more upgrade resources. And that's a neat idea, but the game gives you free reign in what way you increase the difficulty, and a lot of the things that you can tweak do not actually meaningfully make the game more challenging, right? You can add more enemies on top, for example, in every room. But guess what? If you don't have any, it's interesting, right? They don't actually spawn in all the enemies at once. They spawn them in, always in groups, right? So you kill the first group and then the next one spawns in, right? So you're not actually fighting more enemies at once. You're just fighting, longer in the same room. And if you don't have a problem with the first wave, you're not gonna have a problem with the subsequent waves, right? So that already is such an easy way to like exploit the upgrade system, and you rack up the difficulty by quote-unquote adding enemies, even though it's not actually getting meaningfully harder. And then, yeah, because I generally already don't have like this faith in the game that I can rely on my skills, I feel like so subject to the RNG instead and to how much I grind it. That's why I'm not even up for the challenge, you know? I don't find it compelling compared to other games I could be playing. And as far as the story goes with Hades, I do think the concept of the game is genius, right? I think it's nice to have this distinct reason to return to the House of Hades, and they just make it very thematically cohesive, I feel. I was very on board with Zagreus' quest from the start of the game, right? He's very immediately likable. And what's really cool about the dialogue is that it feels very efficient, right? It doesn't really take up much time. They balance it in a way that you talk to a lot of characters, but you don't talk to each one for very long. But still, you get like, in the dialogue that is there, you get a lot of implied history, and you get a real personal sense for the relationships between the characters, right? It doesn't... The relationships don't just feel interchangeable, right? It feels like very genuine, established sort of connections between Zagreus and the other characters. I think that's something that genuinely is really difficult, right? And I think they pull it off very well. I will say I did hear a lot of repeating lines and shit, right? I don't think it's like the game is like that much of a marvel in that sense. But I just thought the whole vibe of it was very cozy and nice, and it's a very likable game in that way. I will say, the payoff in the story is not there at all. I think, again, as thematically sort of sound as everything was, kind of, the way it eventually wraps up in the end, is super weak. It feels very awkward and very arbitrary. I don't want to spoil it, but the way you essentially redo the ending like fucking 20 times, and then at some point the characters like decide, oh, okay, the problem is solved now, right? It's pretty bad. And after investing that kind of time, when the story was the main reason I kept playing in the end, right? Not so much the gameplay anymore. That's pretty disappointing. Art is nice. It's just, that's the thing. It's kind of pains me to shit on the game. I really do dislike the way this game kind of works, right? Sort of on a conceptual level. But still, it's hard to hate on it, right? And I think clearly there's a lot of talent that went into it, and I was enjoying it in bursts. But generally, I don't get the hype for it, and yeah, I do think, again, the story and, like, the characters have just such presence that I really don't see in a lot of games, right? And it's very easy to see why the game blew up the way it did, just based on that. But yeah, that's that. Final game in the Meh 5 is Resident Evil Remake 3. And Resident Evil Remake 3... Resident Evil Remake 3? Resident Evil 3 Remake. Thank you. It's like the definition of meh. It's the perfect 5 out of 10 game. Kind of, but also it kind of sucks. See, what sucks about it is that it has basically nothing to do with RE3, right? It has the same basic premise, but that's it. It does not feel like that game at all. It does not have... They really just turned it into a linear corridor shooter with pretty weak combat mechanics, right, overall. And, like, comparatively to other games in that style you could be playing. They didn't really embellish the open city exploration that much. I do think the Raccoon City part at the start is the best part of the game, right? But it's like an hour long, maybe? Like, max. Oh, that's my door. Yeah, my door rang just now, and then I got distracted for like an hour. But yeah, as I was saying, it's not even... You can play through the Raccoon City part very quickly, which is good, right? I like that. You can either take your time, or it's so not driven by set pieces. Well, there are some set pieces, right? But like, it's open-ended enough that you can, like, if you know what you're doing, you can get through very quickly. To me, that's a positive sign more than anything. The bigger issue is just that, like, that part kind of is a hint at what it could have been, right? Like, the idea of Resident Evil in an open city, which is what original RE3 hinted at, right? Because OG RE3, it was still a very, segmented rooms and shit, right? It was very much a Resident Evil game. And then when you have the promise of, like, oh, we're doing that concept now, but as a, like, with modern tech and, like, as a full-scale thing, that is very exciting, right? If you think, oh, they're gonna take some liberties with it. But, I mean, they took so many liberties with it that it doesn't even act on that concept. It's just a completely different game, you know? with the same, again, basic skin attached. So on that level, it is like profoundly fucking disappointing. Like, just very, very bad, right? That's my phone. And in most circumstances, I think it will be really hard on this, right, as a remake. Obviously, considering I just spent half an hour fucking shitting all over Final Fantasy VII Remake, it should be obvious that I think that that's fair, right, to shit on this game as well, on that kind of basis. But somehow, when I had a good time, man, I just had a decent time with this game and was just cozy. When I finished it, I was relatively happy, right? I was not upset at all. I did think it was... That's the thing, there was nothing especially good about it. But it's just you get swept up in the vibes and Jill is really hot, you know? I know that's a very bad explanation for why I still sort of enjoyed this game. I mean, yeah, there's like some okay boss fights and fucking some of the environments are like kind of cool. I don't know. It's pretty whatever. I think it deserves its spot in the meh list. Did I say, by the way, that the meh list is in no particular order? It's not like I'd say out of these, Resident Evil easily is the most meh game. But still, like, yeah, exactly. Like, I had a decent time, but I'm never gonna play it again, right? It's that kind of game. Whereas, even though I'm not the biggest fan of RE3 original, right? I replayed it recently, and I thought it was fine. You know, I had a decent time with it, and I could see myself playing that again, right? Even though it's not my favorite Resident Evil. There's still some unique qualities to that game, right? With how random Nemesis is and stuff. Whereas with this remake, it's like, yeah, who the fuck gives a shit? Nobody's gonna remember this, right? And that's very sad, right? That they had this once in a lifetime kind of opportunity, and they didn't seize it at all. And I mean, you can tell, we know what happened at this point, right? It was rushed out only a year after RE2 make, with a different developer at the helm, so of course, like, they just didn't give it the attention it deserved, right? And from the very first teasers, I guess, that should have been obvious. It's just very disappointing, but like, again, I'm not that mad about it, weirdly. I can't really explain it. So that's the Meh 5. That's the Meh 5. Now we got the top 3 left, but of course I also mentioned we're gonna do the old 5 as well. In between, I'm gonna wrap those up really quickly, and then we're gonna get to the top 3. I already mentioned Halo. I'm gonna talk about it in a little bit. I think I first want to do the number 5 spot is shared by 2 games that I didn't finish yet, but that I thought about a lot last year, and those were Rain World and Odin Sphere. And obviously both for totally different reasons, right? Matthew Matos has made a really great video about Rain World that I think does a lot to sell it. I think the best thing I could say about Rain World is that it's this very deeply atmospheric game with a lot to say thematically, but it conveys the experience through still very uniquely gamey systems, right? I don't want to spoil what exactly about it is so fascinating, but it is just a very dynamic feeling world and a dynamic feeling game, and it's just that with so much thematic weight attached, in a way I really truly have not seen elsewhere, and I'm really fucking curious to finish it at some point, right? Like, it's like this game that has not stopped haunting me ever since I sort of abandoned it, because I was very busy last year at the time. I think now might be a good time to actually get back to it. But yeah, and then the Odin Sphere, just the coziest fucking game ever made. I think Vanillaware have a really cool approach to just juggling mechanics in 2D. It's just very, like, any combo that you can think you can do, right? It feels just very natural, very intuitive, and that's very nice. And They have like very cool systemic mechanics where every item is a physical object in the world, and you can like enemies will actually try to use items as well. They will pull out a potion and then they're about to drink it, and then you can actually make them throw the potion out of their hand. And that's really fun, cool. I think the 2D perspective actually makes that kind of thing more intuitive in a way, because you can very easily predict sort of the physical reactions of things. Like if the potion bumps into you or into an enemy, like you can kind of imagine where it's going to travel, and I think it's really cool. I got both Gwendolyn's and Cornelius' story now. Have those finished. Just gotta keep playing. Just gotta find time to keep playing. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it. And just like also again, just something about this game and Muramasa, the way the story is told. I'm not sure. This probably warrants deeper analysis at some point, but like, they just have, again, just this really weird, cozy feeling. I guess it almost reminds me of Hades in a way, yeah, where you can tell from the side of the writers, or the writer probably, in the case of George Kamitani. I'm not sure if there's more writers outside of him. Avenilor. There's just a very deep reverence for like the history that these stories are baked into, but also the characters have the sincerity to them that I really like, and not like in this. A Gaming Brits actually talked about this in his review for Spider-Man Miles Morales, that the characters are so matter-of-fact all the time that it kind of makes them not very likable, and I agree with that. In Odin Sphere, it's sincerity in a different way, right? It's like just characters that strongly believe in certain things, right? And you really buy into their conviction, and I find that very appealing. So that's cool. I'm gonna talk about Halo next. Halo is fucking goated. I think I want to make a whole video about Halo, so maybe I'm gonna keep it light here. It's just that, I was alluding to earlier, but no other game gives you this experience of like scrambling on a battlefield, right? Where I'm picking up weapons dynamically, I'm thinking about which weapons the enemies are gonna drop, right? And see, I played through all the Halo games last year, but Halo CE stuck out as my clear favorite, and so like just this replay solidified it as one of my favorite games ever. And the AI is just something that is so fucking unparalleled. I still have not really seen just elites in Halo 1 specifically. The way they move is so insanely cracked, and just the unit prioritization in Halo is so strong, right? That if you kill an elite, the grunts will run away, and then there's enemy infighting, and just generally it really truly feels like the enemies have a life of their own. And yeah, I just love the way the weapons are balanced. I'm gonna talk about it more in another video, but I don't want to drag this out too much. What games do I talk about next? I guess Wonderful 101 might be a good one. I've been playing Wonderful 101 again very recently as well. The 3-master. But like last year, sort of the experience of playing it very seriously again for the first time in a good while was very nice. Especially now that it's at 60 FPS and with decent loading times, right? That definitely makes a huge difference. I was always a fan of this game, right? But it was really, with some of the tweaks that they made, especially with the multi-unite thing. At first I hated that, right? At first I hated that you had to unlock multi-unite. But actually, the more I thought about it, the more it actually kind of made sense, because multi-unite doesn't really work anyway unless you have a good number of team members already. Well, I mean, I guess you might say that over the course of a level, you get to 100 people anyway, as you recruit citizens and stuff. So the most famous example is that when you get to the first Lambo fight, you just spam sword multi-unite. In the Wii U version, that was very possible. Here, it's not. Well, when you're starting with a fresh file, it's not. But the thing is that as much as I hated that change, right, I felt it was very limiting. Initially, I did very weirdly notice that, I was using it way more consciously after that. You know, once I bought it, I was way more sort of gung ho about using it. I was like, oh, okay, all right, I'm gonna sort of actually actively, consciously think about how I'm gonna activate it. And yeah, like relearning the game in this way was very fun. I think there's a lot of weird, dumb problems with the remaster. My least favorite thing about it is that they always replay the introductions for every wonderful member that joins their team. So for Wonder Green, for example, when you meet him for the first time, obviously he gets a big cutscene, right? In the Wii U version, then, if you play that same level one more time, obviously they know Wonder Green is already in your party, so they don't play that whole cutscene, right? They just skip it. They skip the whole tutorial scenario. In fact, you don't have to. Like on your first playthrough, you basically have to wait and fumble against the enemy until Wonder Green comes in. On your second, that's not necessary because it just makes sense, right? Well, in the remaster version, it's very weird because every time you do that section, you have to wait for Wonder Green to come back. They basically remove him from your party, and then you have to wait and stuff. And they do this I mean, I'm using Wonder Green as an example, but they do this with literally every fucking one of those scenarios. It's very annoying. And there's just sections where the higher frame rates causes problems, especially toward the end with some of the set PC stuff. And that was one of my takeaways, sort of, as I was acclimating to the game again, like, okay, this game does have a lot of QTEs and set pieces and shit that I think are good, but that I sometimes am not perfectly in the mood for, right? I kind of sometimes wish I could just boot up the game and then play combat, right? I do, but like the thing is, I never really unlocked everything in the Wii U version, right? So I'm super excited to do that now that I have it on PS5. I played it on PC at launch, but PC version is kind of weird. Wasn't really messing with that. Like I did like one of the really hard Kakarigos on PC, and then it didn't save my progress. And I was like, okay, fuck this. I'm gonna play on PS4. And then the PS4 version ran kind of bad. I was like, okay, I'm gonna wait until I have a PS5. So that was that. Wonderful 101, great game. I mean, if you listen to this, like, you're probably aware of Wonderful 101, right? Like, you should just fucking play it. Okay. If you're a longtime follower of mine, if you don't follow me on Twitter, but you've watched every of my YouTube videos, every one of my YouTube videos, you might not know that I have really come around on Devil May Cry 4. It's like one of my favorite games now. And I mean, I'll say I always enjoyed playing as Nero, right? I always liked playing as Nero. Even though I did think some of the enemy design is weird. And, you know, it is weird, but now I think it's actually weird and good. And, like, it's just my brain has accessed the Matrix with this game. I finally get it. I still don't really like playing as Dante. But just the physical fucking feeling of it, the inertia, how fast it is, the gravity is huge, right? That I actually have to not just put effort into like juggling enemies, but like it just feels better, right? It just feels more clutch to do juggles in this game. The whole game is just way fucking faster paced than something like DMC5, and just the way you can move and yeah, it's just the fucking best. And you know, I played it mostly on PC, and that was like a big part of it, I guess. That on PC there's a new mod called DMC4 Hook that has a lot of quality of life options, but also the fact that the PC version is just, the vanilla version is just way better than SE. They fucked up some stuff in SE that makes some move timings unnecessarily hard. I'm not about that. I definitely feel the difference. And like one weird thing that I noticed is that they actually changed the Legendary Dark Knight mode. It's not the same in SE. In SE, they actually, for example, in the first stage, well, after you fight Dante, right, in the tutorial, they actually removed the blitz enemies, for example, right? In SE, it's mostly just scarecrows. And that's fucking weird, and I don't like that. And I thought generally the enemy layouts on LDK in vanilla were a lot better and a lot more enjoyable, and I really miss playing the vanilla version right now. Because, like I said, I don't have a PC. Did I say that already here? I don't have a PC right now, so I can't play it. Oh, yeah, that sucks. But yeah, Devil May Cry 4, goated. It's just living in my head rent-free. And what's also the other game that's like living in the same exact part of my brain is Super Smash Bros. Melee. Melee is not a game that I grew up with. It's always a game that I sort of admired from afar and that I loved watching competitively. But that I never really played because obviously I didn't have anyone to play with, right? I scrubbed against the CPU with Marth and like I had like a phase where I did the single player content a lot. And that was very enjoyable, but like obviously I never got the true fucking experience of Melee, right? Of competitive Melee. But now there's Slippy, right? Slippy came out last year, online matchmaking / rollback netcode solution for Melee, and that made me play it, and I've just gotten more and more serious about it over time, and it's the fucking best. It's, yeah. Like, I think I want to do a separate video of Melee as well. I have the metagame review that you can... by the time this goes up, the metagame review should also be up in, like, 1 or 2 days later, right? So, in there, I talk a lot about Melee as well, if you're curious. I think I do want to do an extra video on Melee, in general, to really convey its appeal. But yeah, it's just this really fucking beautiful thing of expression and like fun neutral, and there's just no other fighting game that makes me feel this good, right? That's so intrinsically fucking fun to play. I've played Falco as well, and Falco just has so many fucking cool things, right? Where the shine launches the enemy up, and like doing a little pillar combo, right? Like knocking the enemy up and down and up and down. It just taps into such primal fucking urges. And the improvement is so, like, I love that the game is so fucking technical and so demanding, right? I think even the auto canceling is like, it's this thing that you sort of look at as this arbitrary barrier at first, right? It's like, oh, okay, I gotta grind this, I guess. But then you realize, huh, like, so much of the game is actually reacting to missed tech. Even top players will tell you that it's impossible to be 100% consistent all the time, right? They will tell you that over the course of a tournament, you wear yourself out. I think a lot of people who don't actually play Melee, they will speak on it with these weird assumptions that, like, oh, of course top players are, like, 100% consistent all the time. No, and that's what makes it interesting, right? Like, the fact that you can fuck up your tech does make the game different, right? I don't think you have to like L canceling, I'm not saying that, but like, I think just saying it's pointless or whatever, it doesn't serve a purpose, is just not true, right? It does make a pretty significant difference in how matches actually play out. And yeah, it's like the least toxic fighting game you can play right now on like actual playable netcode, and simultaneously like the most expressive and the deepest fighting game probably. So I don't know why you wouldn't play it. And it's Smash, right? So if most of us grew up with Smash, and they probably have an easy time learning it. So yeah. I'm realizing this is getting painfully fucking long, dude. Oh my god. This is a terrible idea. Okay, let's finally get through the top 3 and wrap this shit up. So this first game that I want to talk about is like, it's the one that I didn't really have strong feelings about. Well, I don't have that strong feelings about the number 2 as well, but like this one I was like, yeah, you know, this is a pretty good game, right? But I didn't expect it to stay in the top 3 by the end, right? And somehow I went, like, I played Samurai Jack, I played the Pathless, sort of with this expectation that, oh, you know, they might enter the top 3, and then it just didn't happen, right? I was like, yeah, okay, actually this game, maybe this game just is it, right? And the game I'm talking about is Tony Hawk, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, fucking 1+2, I think that's what it's called, yeah. I feel the need to do a big post-production disclaimer here, real quick. As much as I like this game, obviously I don't want to endorse Activision Blizzard. I hate to advertise something that they've made, that they've put their name on with all the recent revelations about their work culture and specifically how they treat women. A lot of the details from that lawsuit that came out are really hard to swallow. There's a lot of abhorrent shit in there that, as much as I feel like you should inform yourself, right, I don't suggest that you just go and seek it out, right? Because it could really ruin your day. And yeah, just like I said, I recorded this after the fact, and I feel kind of bad, right, that I didn't think to say anything on the topic when I was recording the Tony Hawk segment. But I hope you can understand, right, that obviously I still really like this game, and my personal opinion is that you just need to decide for yourself what you want to put your money in, what you want to play, can you associate with this under good faith. Personally, I still would play this game, right? I don't see anything morally wrong with that, but I personally would not want to give the company more money, because it just makes me, not because I know it's going to accomplish anything, it's not, but it's just going to make me feel icky, and yeah, that's my piece on that. I hope you enjoyed the rest of this video. Tony Hawk is like the series that I always greatly admired from afar. You very rarely have such an expressive, technical-ass game in the West, right? That's like, I think Tony Hawk is a very unique thing in that it's so focused on expression. It's like, yeah, it's like a Devil May Cry, but instead of styling on enemies, you style on the level. And that's pretty cool. They're very intrinsically appeals to me, and I think the mechanics are well thought out for what they are. I do think there's like some fundamental things about Tony Hawk that I will just probably never get used to, right? I do think the way dropping a combo is like punished so hard does not feel good, right? It does not feel good that I've done like a half-hour combo and then I make one tiny mistake and then all that work is gone, right? I think it's well designed for what it is. I think it makes sense. It's a logical system. It's just very frustrating, right? But still, I see. This is like the first Tony Hawk where I actually felt cool, you know, where the sort of visual presentation kind of matched my personal idea of like what the game was, right? I like playing Tony Hawk as like a chill game to just fucking ride around in, yeah. And just there's something about the stages and the art design in this game that just gives the game way more atmosphere than I got from the older Tony Hawks, honestly. And I say that as someone who was pretty negative about the first couple trailers that they showed, right? I did not have high expectations for the visuals. But just with the motion blur and the animations and just the feedback that you get from landing and jumping and stuff, ollieing, I should say. It's just so nice and so cathartic that, yeah, it really bridged the gap for me. That this is the game that actually made me like Tony Hawk for real. when it's a series that I always kind of wanted to like, right? That I was like, yeah, this is, I can acknowledge that this is good. It's just like not really grabbing me. And for me, just the difference in polish with this one, and then also the fact that it combines like all the best pieces. It feels like all the ideal pieces, maybe the ideal pieces for me, into a single package, right? It has these very simple levels from the first two Tony Hawk games that are very digestible for like a noob like me. But it also has the smooth mechanics from the later games, right? With the revert. I feel like, I think Tony Hawk 1 original is kind of interesting because it's so much less focused on combos, right? Because you can't. There's no manual, so there's no way to chain things together unless there's rails, right? So the game doesn't really expect you to do combos. So individual tricks were more important, right? And then Tony Hawk 3 has the manual and the revert, so you can... There's no reason to ever stop the combo, right? You can come out of a half pipe and then still, with the revert, go into the manual and then keep it going that way. Tony Hawk 2 always felt like the odd duckling in the middle, you know, where it had the manual and it expected you to do long combos, but it didn't have the revert, so the half pipes like completely killed your momentum, and that just felt very poorly considered. So that's why I think my friend Björn, who's like a huge fucking Tony Hawk fan, he will probably agree with me that 2, for some reason, it's like the normie favorites, even though most Tony Hawk fans probably don't even see it as the best piece. For that reason, right? Because it's just this awkward middle stuff, if you look at it that way. But yeah, this one, it has the exact mechanics that I want. Obviously, it is a different game, right? You can't really compare it to 1 and 2, right? It has more in common with them, sort of aesthetically, and I don't mean aesthetically in terms of visuals. I just mean the overall vibe of it, than with the actual nitty-gritty mechanics, right? This is not a replacement for the actual experience of playing Tony Hawk 1 and 2. But for me, honestly, it's just the right Tony Hawk, right? It's just the one that I like, and it's cool. And yeah, you can put on your own music. You know, it's a good game to listen to Death Grips 2 instead of the actual soundtrack. Yeah, like it's just such a vibe. Like you can throw this game on with like lo-fi hip hop. You know, it's just so relaxing somehow. I like just fucking skating through stages. You know. See, talking about it right now makes me want to play it. So yeah, that's my number 3. Next on the list is Astrobot. Astro's Playroom. That's what it's called. The other one was Astrobot Rescue Mission, PlayStation VR. Didn't play that because I don't have a VR headset. But yeah, got this obviously with the PS5. It's kind of a built-in tech demo. And, you know, as a 3D platformer, I think it's pretty alright. It's not super remarkable, right? I think it has like very permissive mechanics. It has the little hover. I think generally when you have a hover in I feel the same way with Mario Sunshine, right? When you have a hover in a platformer, it kind of slows down the pacing in a way that is not my preference, right? And yeah, it gives you this constant safety net that what makes Mario 64, for example, feel awesome is that you're always taking risks, right? Calculated risks. And obviously that's inherently just not true when you have a hover or something. And there's no way to like really go fast in this game. It's not like a schmoovy fucking platformer, right? It's more about just cute level design ideas, cute set pieces, and vibes or whatever, and also obviously the immersive quality that you get with the DualSense. It's not, though, yeah, I should say, it's not just immersive. I talked about this in my PS5 video, that also you can probably see soon, if you're watching this. That genuinely there are set pieces in this game that would just not be as intuitive without the adaptive triggers, for example. Last time I I use the monkey thing as this example where basically L2 and R2 represent your left and right hand, and your you're looking at the monkey from the back, sort of, and they're climbing a wall, right? They're climbing up, so it's basically a 2D plane. You're climbing like horizontally and vertically, and you push the respective triggers to sort of reach out with that hand, right? And then there's one point where the trigger sort of hardens, and then if you push past that point, you actually grab onto the rock, right? The rock on the wall, right? You hold the trigger to choose the rock you want to select, and then you push it all the way through to actually grab it. And if you didn't have that stopping point, I think it would feel way less natural. Obviously, in a technical sense, you could do it with the DualShock 4, for example, but it just would not feel right. It would not make intuitive sense, right? If you gave this to the average player, it would not really feel good to play that way. And I think those kinds of subtle improvements to not just game feel, but also, again, just intuitive controls, I think is very valuable. I saw the same thing with Returnal this year, where they just consolidated certain functions into a single trigger in a way that I think is very intelligent. And I dislike, yeah, in a lot of games, like aiming focused games, when you have to take your thumb off of the right stick to press some face buttons. Obviously, a lot of games offer the option to remap your controls, right, like Returnal. And the problem then is that because the actions are not so consolidated, you still need like a lot of shoulder buttons for different things, right? And then the layout that I had this with Ratchet and Clank actually, where ironically, even though it's a PS5 game, right, and uses the DualSense, I still felt like that the actions were very spread out over the different buttons, and I couldn't actually get the layout that I wanted, where I didn't have to use the face button so much. With Returnal, for example, that was not a problem, because, again, they consolidated so much stuff into just the L2 trigger, both aiming and alt-fire, that I could just map my jump and my dash onto the remaining shoulder buttons, and it felt really good. That was kind of a tangent, but, like, yeah, I think Astrobot is just a great introduction to the PS5, and it's a neat little game in its own right. I guess my only... Yeah, it's just nice to explore. It's, again, I had fun with every single set piece. I played through the whole thing in one sitting, and it was just a very enjoyable, memorable thing, and I would definitely play it again. The one real criticism that I had with it was that I felt that the 3D camera, you move the camera with the right stick, like in most sort of regular third-person games, I thought that was not necessary. I felt that the game could have actually done with a fixed camera of some kind. And I'm mentioning this not because it's something that's specifically relevant to me. It's more that I showed this game to my parents, and they were super enamored with it, right? And like I figured, right? I figured that it would be something that would appeal to them. The problem is just the camera is such a huge hurdle, right? And I don't know, I think for the exact kind of target audience of this kind of game, it seems a little bit unfortunate that you're limiting the appeal in that very unnecessary kind of way, right? By going for this kind of camera style when the game almost entirely didn't need it, right? There's only one section where you're like firing a bow, where it's even remotely necessary, right? And yeah, they could have had the, like, you go into a different sort of aiming view with the bow anyway, so they could have had it just for that, right? The 3D camera. And that made everything else fixed. Obviously, choosing the angles is like a lot of work. I got that. But yeah, just a minor point. See, I listened back to this and realized that I barely even talked about Astrobot as a game. I just said that it was just a vibe and like it really used the controller well, I guess. And I want to go into a little more depth with that, especially that I mentioned that this game has this immersive quality to it. And I talk a lot about this in the PS5 video that I mentioned that you can watch, right, where how exactly the rumble works and how it works in tandem with the controller speakers. What you hear a lot is that when you walk over sand, oh, it never fucking stops with interruptions. Yeah, what you'll hear people say a lot is that when you walk over sand, it feels like you walk over sand, and I can, yeah, like the sound does a lot of the heavy lifting, but the vibration definitely has like a depth to it that is not something we had seen before, right? So I think ultimately sort of what makes the experience so enjoyable is how fast-paced it is, how charming it is, but also how tactile it feels. It's a very good feeling game to play kinesthetically. It has this very toy-like quality to it almost, even though, yeah, it is a linear platformer, right, where you go through obstacles, whatever. When I think toy-like, I think more something like Katamari or Nobi Nobi Boy, right, where intrinsically part of the game is to interact with the environment or whatever. Obviously, this is not really that kind of game, but still, I got that there's all these characters walking around, you can punch them, and they have funny reactions to it, and there's like little doodads in the environment that you can knock around that have actually physics attached to them, which is kind of cool. So the game, it's funny, like, we're a couple months into the PS5's life now, and we still haven't seen anyone really tap into the controller again to that level, with the immersive quality, right? I mentioned how well Returnal uses the triggers to consolidate actions, right? That's pretty cool. But obviously such a big part of games is to interact with the world, right? That you're a character in a world, and that they can realize it in a lot of detail, and that they can make that very kinesthetically pleasing. In fact, I actually worked on a game this college semester, where that was the whole point, right? Where I'm gonna talk about it more at a later date, but the whole point of it was that it was this tactile experience, and you interacted with this world, and things were just very satisfying, right? I think that's a super underexplored direction in games. I think we kind of, yeah, we try to make things feel as pleasant as possible in like very regular games, action games, whatever. Sometimes do fall, right? Sometimes things are polished up to a point where it kind of often it can reduce the freedom of the controls if you make interactions too perfect, right? And in cases like Metal Gear Rising and Bayonetta 2, I think a lot about how the surface level polish, the front end of those games, kind of masks that they lack depth, right? Where people just talk about how good actions feel to perform. It's kind of a slippery slope. I guess that's why, yeah, I want more games like Astrobot, where the whole point of the experience, not the whole point, right? It is still like an enjoyable platformer with fun challenges and good pacing, good vibes. I like the way they switch up between different set pieces, right? And yeah, the way you move between set pieces is so organic. It does all that really well, but what ultimately sells the experience is just how intrinsically enjoyable it is. And I think they were very aware of that, right? They were very aware that, yeah, that's the whole point. They wanted to show what the controller can do. They have this funny controller demo at the very start where they walk you through the different buttons of the controller, and for example, when you hold the triggers, it fires up these jet engines at a certain point, and I saw so many streams and videos of people like doing that and then just being so surprised when it happens, right? And just the tactility of it. I think just the novelty of Astrobot and how people responded to it, I think shows that there's still a lot of space left to be explored there. Okay, so Do you all want to know what the 2020 game of the year is? Well, it's the game that's actually kind of relevant again. I think if you've watched up to this point, you can figure out which one it is. I guess it's a game that kind of surprised me in a way. I was really excited for it when when it was announced and when it was coming out. I was expecting it to be good, right? But like, what surprised me about it is its staying power. That I'm still thinking about it a lot, and that it seems like the kind of game that we just take for granted, and where people sort of just say, oh yeah, it's really awesome, it's really good, right? But I can tell they don't feel that with that much conviction, right? I think most people don't actually see how good this game is, and I'm obviously talking about Streets of Rage 4. Streets of Rage 4 is the actual fourth Streets of Rage game. There may have been... Was there not like there's like a Game Gear version or something? There was something, right? But like, it's kind of crazy to think that Streets of Rage is this super fucking iconic ass series, and there really was only those first 3 games, and then just complete silence, right? Obviously, there were attempts to bring it back with was it Fighting Force? That game from IDOS? I forget. And then there was the fan-made Streets of Rage remake thing called that was called. It's called Streets of Rage remake, but it's not actually a remake of Streets of Rage. It's more like best way to put it probably is that it's Streets of Rage Mania. Yeah. Like Sonic Mania. So Streets of Rage 4, I'm getting really tired. I'm sorry, my eyes are like starting to close. First proper fucking Streets of Rage game in a million years, and what's amazing about it is that I feel like they could have taken so many shortcuts on it. They could have made so many more obvious choices that would be so much more easily agreeable and so much less ambitious, right? But no, they completely overhauled the art style, sort of at the risk of alienating fans, right? They only brought Yuzo Koshiro back for like a couple tracks. Had the soundtrack handled mostly by a French composer, I think Olivier something is his name. And then also some outside artists. And then also had the gameplay handled by this weird indie developer. That's Guard Crush Games, yeah. So the art was handled by Lizard Cube, and Guard Crush did the engine, right? And Guard Crush were mostly known for this game called Streets of something? Wait. Streets of Fury, thank you. Where it was sort of stills of people mapped onto sort of 2D skeletons, but with like a complex kind of juggling and wall bounce system, whatever, right? Just very interesting looking game. I never played it, but like I may have to after this. See, the thing about this game, I guess like mechanically, right? Again, I mentioned like this weird developer, right? This game is like the first time that we're actually seeing proper fighting game mechanics and concepts in a 2D beat 'em up. Not just in a 2D beat 'em up, but like in some kind of single player fucking I go through levels and fight enemies kind of game, right? Maybe that sounds stupid and silly, right? I mentioned Odin Sphere before, right? That in Odin Sphere you it's a 2D game where you juggle enemies, right? Doesn't seem that different, right? No, it is super different actually. Because yeah. Let's say in Streets of Rage 4, when you knock away an enemy, right? You knock them in the air and then they fly sort of horizontally, and they will bump against the wall, and then they will bounce back off the wall, right, in a kind of natural feeling way, I guess, right, in the way that you would expect them to. And then very naturally you approach them again and try to maintain the juggle, and then you might even bounce them off of the wall again. And what you'll notice is that you can do this a couple times before at some point a hard limit kicks in and they can't bounce against the wall anymore, right? And that's something, it's literally just a fighting in concept, right? It's something that's so, these kind of combo limiting systems are super common in fighting games, right? Obviously they don't want you to just infinitely juggle your opponents in a multiplayer, two-player fighting game, right? It just makes perfect sense. In the context of a single-player beat-em-up, it's just as interesting, right? Because then you can still find, just like in a fighting game, you can still find ways to work with that system and to circumvent it, right? Because then certain attacks have what is called the off-the-ground property, meaning you can still hit enemies when they're on the ground, right? And that only applies to certain attacks, right? And that inherently makes you want to go again into the training mode and experiment with what the fuck you can do. And I'm not sure if I'm conveying properly just how significant that feels to me, you know? That I can be in a room surrounded with all these AI enemies that have like all these different quirks, right? That you have guys that anti-air you, guys that sort of have a wind-up and they sort of tornado kick at you, right? Guys that come at you with items. It's all this shit to think about, and then you attack them, and then your attacks will naturally launch them in the air, and then you very intuitively make the decision, oh, I do this move, because it will maintain some kind of juggle, right? It's just such a different approach to that kind of idea than what you would see in Dragon's Crown, Odin Sphere, even Devil May Cry, Tekken, whatever, right? Like, just the fact that they've transplanted these concepts so well into that kind of experience where, again, as a single-player person, right, playing through this adventure, you have great reasons to find ways to actually maintain juggles, right? To keep enemies in a combo for as long as fucking possible, because these enemies are fucking vicious, right? This game's hard. I didn't struggle with it too much on my first playthrough. I know a lot of people like were surprisingly taken back with it. But guess what? I think this game, it may have some moments that feel like a little bit overboard, especially on Mania mode, for example. But generally, I did not feel there was like a single section where it was like, oh, this bullshit, I can't do this, right? Especially like even bosses like the one biker guy, right? You get to the end of the biker section, then you go to this sort of like lot in the back, and there's all these bikes standing around, and the guy attacks you. You can actually use the bikes themselves to maintain the juggle, right? And just that, coupled with all of these different characters you can play as that are really deep and like genuinely very different. I had often this experience that I would get stuck on a level on Mania mode with one character, and then I switch to someone else, and they have a way easier time in that specific level, right? I think it's pretty, like, the balance of the game now, especially after like some balance patches, and now with the DLC. Oops. Oh god, sorry about that. Seems in a really healthy place. I think most of the characters have really cool reasons to play them. I think the heavier characters I'm not crazy about. Especially Max. Max, who was added with the DLC now, I think is very redundant. I think he does not add much to the game. I thought Floyd was like, alright. Floyd is like, okay, that's, even though it's not my preference, right? Just having a grappler kind of character, I think, in this game makes sense, right? It feels more well-rounded that way. But everyone else, like, not every character is a combo monster, right? Cherry, for example, cannot really do long combos at all. but she has all these other unique fucking mechanics that let you play the game in a way that is very fun, right? It's fun to bounce on top of enemies' heads and to grab them out of a jump. And I just genuinely felt that when I wanted to combo someone with a different character, I actually had to approach it conceptually very differently, right? That a character like Blaze or Adam, they can rely on their air specials more, whereas Axel has to find ways to pick enemies off of the ground again after a couple hits. And just like, yeah, with the DLC, they added this whole training and lesson mode, and it was very interesting to see that the older character roster, all of those, they had way more fleshed out lessons than the 3 new characters, right? And obviously, that's because there's a lot about these characters that clearly it was like not super intended, right? It was just a natural result of the systems, and it was the developers discovering things about the characters that they had made in tandem with the community, and then implementing that like as a tutorial in the game, right? That Axel, for example, can give some of his moves momentum by canceling his regular special into those moves, right? And that's really cool, and that's something that I didn't even know was possible, right? And that's something that's completely unique to Axel. Now, I also really like the new characters, especially Estelle. She's just very intrinsically... Oh, fuck, I didn't even... Oh, Estelle is such a good example, right? Where she has one move where she jumps forward and grabs the enemy that you contact, right? And then when you're on the ground, you can slam the enemy sort of repeatedly, and every time you do that, it's sort of this small AoE hitbox, right? And you can actually hit surrounding enemies with that. And I love the fact that this is a game that doesn't need a dodge button, right? That defense, I love the idea that like the attacks have sort of built systems into themselves that will protect you from enemies if you just implement them correctly, right? Where again, with this grab move from Estelle, if I time it right, I can land next to a crowd of enemies, and then the slam that I get when I land on the ground will be enough to knock away everyone else, and that will protect me, right? That's just something, as you're attacking, as you're piling on combos, and as you're moving, you have to be very forward-thinking with where you land. And that's, again, as a 2D game, with how they implemented the mechanics, that's just something that you don't really get in other action games like this, right? And I fucking... a lot of people have talked about this, right? But, like, the fucking health special system, right? Where, basically, when you use a special, it will turn a little bit of your health into green health, right? The green health recharges when you do damage to enemies, right? So, technically, you can just do specials infinitely, and as long as you don't take damage, you're fine, right? As long as you just hit enemies regularly enough, you can recharge it and then keep doing specials, right? But if you get hit once, you instantly lose all the green health that you have accumulated up to this point. So it's very clearly, like, nice risk-reward, right? A lot of your combos are reliant on you using specials, right? And a lot of the defense in this game is reliant on specials, right? You have the neutral special that is completely invincible, but that is your primary method of avoiding things, right? And you have to be very okay with using that and taking that risk, right? Especially on Mania difficulty, where I love the fact that the screen is just fucking full of enemies on the higher difficulties. It really does not feel the same anymore when you go back to the lower levels, and it's just way less populated. It's funny because they say on the difficulty select that Mania isn't even remotely fair, and you can kind of see why they're saying that, because it's such a different fucking experience. But I really do think if you're playing this game, you owe it to yourself to play on Mania, because it's just so fucking cool. See, again, with the special health system, whatever, it's just such an intuitive fucking way to handle it. And like, you didn't need cooldowns, you didn't need an extra meter, like, It's the most freeform system while also being a really interesting decision at every turn, right? And it's just perfect in that way. And yeah, I can just not say enough good things on Streets of Rage 4. I'll also say I think the art style is great, even though you wouldn't naturally think this when you think Streets of Rage, I guess. I guess what I like about this game is that this art style, the art style alone, right, has already become so iconic that to me it stands toe-to-toe with the rest of the games, right? They were just not afraid to put their own spin on Streets of Rage that felt genuinely very inspired in its own right, while also still honoring the older games, right? It's cool the way they evolved Axel's character design, right? For example, that he's a little bit chubby, you know. He has punished Axel now. It's just so fucking cool. And the soundtrack is very varied. You may have been concerned like, oh, it's not Yuzo Koshiro doing everything. He did a couple songs, right? And they're really cool. There's like great subversive moments, especially like even in the first stage where the car crashes into the wall and then you get this like weird sort of polka dance beat. And you have sort of similar flavors of music later in the game, where it's not just always exclusively EDM, kind of like the older games were. It's a little bit more varied while still feeling very Streets of Rage and always very thematically appropriate, right? I will say maybe the only fucking criticism I have is that the levels, the journey from level to level feels a little bit haphazard. You know, the game doesn't really have the same kind of sense of flow that maybe Streets of Rage 2 has or something. Where Streets of Rage 2 feels like this is a very seamless kind of journey, right? And here it's like, oh, okay, now you're in a plane, and now you're like in the sewers, and it feels kind of random, right? But that's such a nitpick. I think Streets of Rage 4, kind of, again, like I was implying at the start, it's the kind of game that is very easy to take for granted, even though it genuinely, to me, proves there's still mechanically new space we can explore. This is not just, it's not just a 2D game where you juggle enemies, right? I genuinely think it's a little bit more than that. And it's so, like, it is genuinely breaking new ground in the 2D space with how it actually makes, like, actual literal fighting game, like true blue fighting game mechanics work in a single player context. While also just executing it really fucking well, right? In a way that's really polished and really enjoyable and really challenging, right? I also need to add that Streets of Rage 4 has so much situational depth. I recorded footage for this yesterday, and I couldn't help but notice, wow, I really am using these very flexible mechanics to approach different situations, different rooms, different levels very fucking differently from each other. That sounds so obvious, right? But I still think in action games it's relatively rare that you do anything but wail on a guy, right? Press the attack button and then dodge at the right time. I think especially with the advent of Dark Souls, you know, as much as I love some of those games, it's very much, you don't really strategically think, okay, how am I gonna attack this guy? I have very rare moments where I'm even like thinking about my stamina, right? For example. In Streets of Rage, there's so many moments where it's like better to hang back, better to stay in the air, better to not jump at all, depending on the enemy type. I already mentioned like some of the enemy types that will come at you from afar with the Hurricane Kick, for example. So in that situation, you gotta be ready for that, right? They telegraph it really well, but in that situation, it's actually worse to hang back, right? Maybe it's better to be in their face. And Cena already said that Estelle is my favorite character out of the new DLC batch. And she emphasizes that really well, especially because she has the grenade, so she can keep enemies at bay, but she can also throw it mid-combo. And the grab, for example, just the rushing grab, that's another nuance, right, where you can keep an enemy locked in for a little bit, but also you make yourself vulnerable. It's just all these little considerations, and it's just fucking good. It's just the best. Yeah, Streets of Rage 4 is the GOAT. It's my game of the year 2020. And that's the video. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed. This was fucking 2 hours, 20 minutes. Oh. I do not look forward to editing this, I gotta be honest with you. Alright, I'll holler at you later. Peace.